My name is Phil Huggan. I'm one of the board members for the AHDB. And today we have two speakers. First is Sharon Hall, who is the Director General for the Potatoes Processors Association and the Snack, Nut and Crisp Manufacturers Association, which rolls off the tongue. And then second, we have Nick White, who's Head of Marketing for AHDB. So in terms of the format, we've got 40 minutes in total, 15 minutes for each session, and then hopefully 10 minutes at the end for some questions, if that's okay. All right, thank you. Sharon, over to you.
Thank you very much, Phil. I need to use all of my 15 minutes, so I will just crack on. Okay, thank you very much for the invite to take part in this seminar today. I plan to highlight how the processing sector is creating opportunities for growth in the GB potato industry and the investment that they need to make to achieve that sustainably. I also want to ask that we all work together to celebrate the potato in all its forms, both fresh and processed. So what's the environment for growth at the moment? The UK government has set itself a target of growing a more prosperous nation. Indeed, they've stated they want to make Britain the most prosperous of all the major economies by 2030, and they cite productivity as the essential ingredient to achieving that goal. Now, productivity for the UK government is built around two main pillars. That's long-term investment in infrastructure, skills and knowledge, and secondly, around promoting innovation. The second key driver for productivity in our sector is about population growth. Now, we all know the figures, 8.5 billion by 2030 and 9.7 billion by 2050. That's a lot of extra people to feed. That's going to create some great opportunities for export of British produce. But in the UK alone, we're expected to see a population increase of 10 million people over the next 25 years. That rate of increase is going to outstrip the rate that we see across Europe. So it's going to be 15% growth here and only 3% across the rest of Europe. So I would say that's another great market opportunity to grow what we're selling in this country. And as at the moment, we only produce about 40% of the food that we consume, I think we could be doing a little bit better. The potato processing sector makes a significant contribution to the UK economy. We're part of the the food and drink industry, which is now the UK's largest manufacturing sector. Processors are the largest customer for GB Potatoes, processing approximately 1.7 million tonnes of potatoes annually. And the crisp sector are helping to drive exports, but more on that later. The processing industry is a substantial employer with over 11,700 direct employees, and if you add in the dependent roles on our supply chain, this total almost doubles. According to AHDB figures, total processed consumer sales, that's both retail and food service, amounted to almost £4 billion in 2014. But what's driving the consumers to eat our products? Well, a key retail trend in the last 5 years has been around consumers wanting versatility, but convenience is key. If you look back to the 1980s, the main meal used to take about 1 hour to cook. Come forward to 2014, people spending only about half an hour cooking and preparing their evening meal. This is a key consumer driver for the development of new products, particularly in the frozen potato sector. A good example of this is the McCain jackets that were launched in 2012. And over the last 3 years, we've seen phenomenal growth with over £40 million annual spend on this new product. Similarly, if we look at the chilled and prepared potato sector, products such as these pre-prepared mash and these mini ready-to-roast potatoes have also seen phenomenal growth. And this is mirrored across the globe, particularly in North America, there's huge growth in this chilled sector. By preparing these products and adding value, consumers are willing to pay more. I mean, we might find it strange, but some consumers think it's completely inconvenient to take a potato, wash it, peel it, and cook it. So they want us to save their time. This is reflected in the figures, and I'm showing here the graph from the DEFRA Family Food Survey. The slide has been produced by AHDB, where since 1974 we have seen a good increase in consumption of processed potato products. Now this is in home. If you add in the out-of-home consumption, this figure is much larger. However, a key challenge for the growth in our sector is the amount of imported product into the UK, particularly in the frozen potato market. This is estimated to be somewhere in the region of 50% of the products consumed are imported. So a clear opportunity for growth. Other challenges are related to our supply chain. In order to secure a long-term supply of raw material for processing, growers need access to land, water, plant protection products, and the latest innovations in crop production to grow high-quality crops, but in a sustainable manner. Variety development with a focus on achieving consistently high yields whilst maintaining the characteristics required for processing could also aid sustainable development. And the PPA works on behalf of its members on issues that might impact on this supply chain and also to ensure that we have a level playing field across the EU. We've yet to see what might be included in the DEFRA's 25-year food and farming plan, but it's likely to include initiatives to promote brand Britain and to support the growth of primary production and the food and drink supply sector in the UK. The ambition is to make British food and farming a world leader. We're also going to have the publication of the National Obesity Strategy in Q1 of 2016, and this could pose some challenges to the wider food and drink industry. But the potato processing sector has already made significant progress in reformulating its products on a voluntary basis. We've reduced saturated fats in both chips and crisps by 70%, largely by switching from palm oil to sunflower oil. There's been over 20% reduction in added-in salt in coated or flavoured potato products, and more than 50% reduction of salt in crisps since 1991, making us one of the lower contributors to salt in the diet. One other cautionary note before I go on to some examples of how we're creating new markets is we must deliver to these new opportunities sustainably. The potato processing sector is an environmentally responsible sector, working with its supply chain to improve resource use efficiency and reducing waste. Water is an essential natural resource in our sector, and by far the largest proportion of water consumption is around 90% in the supply chain is actually needed to grow the crop. So processors work very closely with their grower groups and their supply chains to encourage best practice. The companies themselves are continuing to invest in the implementation of innovative measures for further reduction of direct water use, and they invest millions in renewable energy, anaerobic digestion, and technologies such as reverse osmosis, which allows higher levels of water recycling and can significantly reduce water usage. They've also been looking about how they transport their products around the country, and they've been reducing road miles and carbon emissions. We've got a great story to tell on waste reduction, and by recycling byproducts in processing and cleaning up wastewater, the target of zero waste to landfill is becoming a reality. Just finally, on frozen food, WRAP figures suggest that in the UK, households are throwing away millions of tonnes of unopened food each year. Recent research by Sheffield Hallam University suggests that meal planning with frozen foods can significantly reduce household waste and greenhouse gas emissions. But to achieve all these sustainable activities, the processors have had to invest a significant amount. So how are we creating new market opportunities? We're investing in new product development, which is driven by extensive consumer insight research. And then new products are promoted through multi-million-pound spends on advertising. Many of these products capitalise on their Britishness or their use of GB potatoes, and just a few examples. Market leaders Walker's Crisps account for 60% of the crisp market and have had commitment to using 100% British potatoes for their core range since 2007. And this is highlighted by the homegrown logo on front of pack. A relatively newcomer to the market, Piper's Crisps, was launched in 2004 by 3 farmers who wanted to produce great tasting quality chips from local potatoes. They're building up their market by highlighting their farming connections, their use of local potatoes, provenance of ingredients, and then they're developing one-to-one relationships with their customers, selling through pubs, delis, farm shops, garden centres, museums, and at festivals. Tyrrell's Crisps, who also capitalise on the Britishness of their product, make their potato crisps from local Herefordshire potatoes. They work closely with local growers to deliver the highest quality from seed to crisp, and their record time for harvesting a potato, washing it, slicing it, cooking it, bagging it, and putting it on a shelf in a local shop is 45 minutes. Now, I said crisps were contributing to improving the export market. The crisp sector is helping to drive exports, and this is a key target in the government's plan to improve productivity. In 2013, the sector exported more than £70 million worth of products, with year-on-year growth of 11.8%. So as an example of this, again with Tyrrell's, they won the Queen's Award for Enterprise for their outstanding contribution in exporting and innovation, and they now export to over 35 countries. International trade represents 25% of Tyrrell's business and remains a key driver for growth. Again, another bit of AHDB MI analysis here suggests that there's even more potential for growth of export of crisps across Europe. EU countries imported a total of 229,000 tonnes of crisps in 2014, which was up 7% from the year before. Total import demand has been steadily increasing since 1999, and the UK accounted for 8.5% of this market, with the majority of the crisps from the UK going to Ireland. But you can see from this slide that there are other growing markets for which the UK only supplies a small proportion, so suggesting another potential for future growth. Crisps accounted for around 15% of the UK exports of potatoes last season in raw equivalent tonnage, but with higher value added than fresh potatoes. Now moving to French fries. McDonald's recently announced their commitment to source 100% British potatoes for their McDonald's French fries to appeal to consumers who are more conscious about where their meals come from. Now, this has been complemented by their messaging in their recent ad campaign, which you may have seen, which features farmers, and on the French fry one, actually using a farmer to convince the consumer that French fries are actually made from potato. McDonald's is one of the largest buyers of British potatoes, and the company expects to buy 250,000 tonnes of potatoes this year through their supply chain partners. McDonald's really values its long-term supply chain relationships, and their hope is that this long-term commitment to source only from this country will give farmers the confidence to innovate and invest for the future. PPA members have also developed bespoke products for the UK food service market. This thicker cut product matches consumer preference in the UK for thick cut chips and is mirrored in some of the retail brands, which Lamb Weston produce out of their Wisbech factory. Another different product are these Lamb Weston dippers, which tap into the trend for sharing plates. Food business operators can create unique offerings by combining the dippers with their own dips and different combinations. And it can be a good revenue driver for that business because they can use them as a starter, a bar snack, or a side of plate. They're cut in such a way to avoid messy dipping, and the traditional cut style gives a homemade natural appearance. These are another new product, McCain's new baby-baked potatoes. They're new potato-sized jackets, lightly seasoned with sea salt and black pepper. They take just 3 minutes in the microwave, and they carry 4 green nutritional indicators on front of pack, making them a perfect, healthy accompaniment for quick dishes for busy consumers. The product also has opportunities for single occupancy households as an alternative to ensure that potato remains side of plate, and also to help manage portion control. Using these smaller potatoes from the crop allows for broader crop utilisation. And then finally, the McCain's innovation team have cracked the recipe for producing a roast potato that looks and tastes homemade. As the adverts say, second to mum. They're basted rather than battered, giving them that all-important crispy outside and fluffy texture inside. And McCain's are investing £6 million in their marketing campaign for this product, online, in-store, out of home, and on TV. So I just want to end today, my final message is the core ingredient for the sector's products is the potato. It's a virtually fat-free, allergen-free, energy-rich carbohydrate that contains dietary fibre, potassium, vitamins B1, B6, C, and iron. And to produce fries, oven chips, and crisps from potatoes, all we do is wash, peel, cut, and lightly fry in sunflower oil. Collaborating across all the sectors to champion the potato makes sense. Together we need to bust some myths, especially around the health profile of the potato itself, but also of the products that are made from it. And we need to include promotion of processed potato products in all of our joint cross-industry activity. Must have speeded up because I've got 23 seconds left. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sharon. And now for a different perspective from Nick White, who's head of marketing at AHDB.
Hello. Right, I'm going to take you through promoting the virtue of potatoes. In terms of this section, really, it's a bit like life. Where you start is really important, and how you start is really important. So in terms of everything we do from a communications point of view, these are the questions that frame how we go about what we do. In promoting the virtues of potatoes, in a very real sense, it starts for us at the beginning with the consumer. So that's about reaching out to children. It's about giving them an engagement with potatoes and involvement with potatoes, and really it's just about trying to get across to them some very simple messages, nothing too in-depth, nothing too highbrow, just getting them to kind of absorb some really simple messages. The program I hope you're all familiar with is Grow Your Own Potatoes. It's in its 11th year now. It's a program of real scale, but more important than that, more important than the scale, is the fun and involvement that it represents. This is about little Johnny, aged 8 at school, coming away from school, understanding that potatoes are healthy and good for you. That's all he needs to understand. In terms of the involvement and the engaging part, we know that a lot of schools where they've got a kitchen facility on site will actually take the potatoes they've harvested out of the classroom and pass them through to that kitchen facility so that then those children can then enjoy the potatoes that they've actually grown in class. So that's where the kind of the physical engagement bit comes. If you go a bit older, 11 to 13-year-olds, that's key stage 3. This is the journey of them starting to understand about how to cook. Not a skill that everybody masters, and everybody masters it to some degree or other. What we want to make sure here is that potatoes are embedded in their cooking experience at the very beginning, because as with anything through this kind of phase of life, what you are taught, the behaviours that you learn, the lessons that you take out, tend to stay with you for the rest of your life. And so what we want to embed here is the fact that they can understand about cooking potatoes in a way that that makes sure that they come across as being quick, tasty, and healthy. So that's the beginning of our journey, if you like, in terms of the virtues of potatoes from a consumer point of view, and it's very much starting at the beginning with children. But the next phase takes us to an older profile of consumer, and this is a really important phase for us, certainly over the next 3 years, where in conjunction with Board Beer, we've got a joint marketing campaign, which will mean an investment in UK terms from a marketing point of view of €3.6 million over that time frame. Now, our audience here isn't children, but actually it's 25 to 44-year-olds. Now, if anybody was in Chris Cowan's session this morning from Kantar, you'll have seen him map out where the kind of problem areas are in the marketplace from a potatoes point of view, but also in terms of fresh produce. And certainly that's one of the reasons that we're targeting this audience here, which is 25 to 44-year-old females. And really what we want to do with this campaign is pull a trigger that gets this target audience to rethink about potatoes. Fundamentally, that they start to think about them as being healthy, convenient, and most importantly, relevant to them. And by pulling that trigger, what we then want them to do, because thinking is one thing, but the action is the important thing, what we then want them to do is actually to have potatoes as part of their midweek meal repertoire. Too often in this age group, potatoes are marginalised to the weekend and they don't form part of a midweek meal. And that's what we're trying to get here, is get people to cook potatoes more often as part of a midweek meal. And again, I would reference you back to what Chris Cowan said this morning, which is, do you know what? If we're going to grow this market, if we're going to drive it back into growth, it is about doing some simple things. It is about just a few key trigger points. And one of those things is just getting an extra meal cooked per week. And this is fundamentally what we're trying to do here. In terms of the communication message, the virtues, if you like, for us, the focus is very much about health. Now, that may seem odd because when you talk to consumers and when we've done tracking studies, most consumers will say, oh yeah, potatoes, they're healthy. But actually, it's what lies beneath the surface that's the important thing. And when you start to push up those consumers and say, okay, well, that's great, I'm glad you think that, but why is that? Why are they healthy? It then all starts to fall apart. It comes down like a house of cards because they don't actually know what underpins that reflex answer. And so what we have to do is give them tangible benefits and tangible kind of attributes, if you like, that they can grasp onto. So for us, that's about saying, do you know what? They're naturally fat-free. They're a source of potassium. They're a source of fibre. And when we talk to consumers in groups and say to them, do you know that potatoes are naturally fat-free? Do you know they're a source of fibre? This is genuinely new news to these consumers. Now, in this industry, in this kind of BP event, people will go, well, why doesn't everybody know that? I know that. I've lived with potatoes all my life. But actually, it's taken a step outside of the BP bubble and looking at the consumer in the real world, and actually they don't know this stuff. So when you say to them, do you know what, potatoes are naturally fat-free, that's new news, and that gets them to rethink about potatoes and how they may start to use potatoes as part of their diet. So we have a strong start point in terms of health. We have a strong start point in terms of talking about the convenience of potatoes. But what you've got to do is really land the message. And so to enable us to do that, or to give us a conduit into doing that, we've created a character. And this is our character. He's Bud. And he's our lead hero, if you like, in terms of landing the message about potatoes. Backed up with our kind of strap line, which is potatoes, more than a bit on the side. And how those two things come together in terms of execution is, this is the press advert that's out of the market at the moment. Very much targeted at female press audience, very much targeted at magazines. And the reason that we go for this arena from a media point of view is basically it's about scale. It gives us tremendous reach. But more importantly than that, reach is one thing. You've got to repeat the message. So it's a bit like the old Blair thing from however long ago when he banged on about education, education, education. You have to repeat the message. You have to keep repeating the message for it to drill in. And that's why the frequency here is so important as well. Now, print alone is not enough. It's a modern world. So complementary to what we do through print advertising is all the work we do around PR. And the focal point here for us is about recipes. But it's not just about talking about recipes in any old sense. It is about talking about them in the sense of being quick, tasty, and healthy. So all of the recipes we do, and this is an example of something that was came through Glamour magazine as part of the PR push that we've done. These recipes are all under 30 minutes, or some of them are actually closer to 20 minutes. Because what we're trying to do, coming back to first principles, is get into the midweek meal repertoire. From a healthy point of view, the stipulation here is that these recipes are 500 calories or less. So we're trying to tick a big health box, we're trying to tick a big time box. Fundamentally, we want to get into the midweek meal occasion. It is a modern world, it is about multimedia touch points, so it isn't just about print. Print's really important, it gives you scale, it gives you reach. People will be quite dismissive about traditional media, but it has a crucial role to play. However, it is beyond that as well. And so we have a presence through YouTube, and we have a digital presence as well. And this is about serving the advertising to the consumer in areas where we know are important to them, because we can track their search history and we can place the ads accordingly. So this is really important. And now we come to the social media aspect. Really, really important. This I've just lifted this out shamelessly from a recent Waitrose food and drink report. 80% of consumers do not like to be told what is healthy. So people don't want to be preached at, basically. It's no longer Big Brother stuff. You can't go into print or be on TV or on radio saying, do this, don't do that. People don't want to listen, or they choose to ignore you. But what they will do is talk to their friends, or they'll go online and they'll surf for information and they'll piece things together and they'll devise their own opinions based on what they hear, and that then will become their truth. So we need to reach them in a way that's really engaging to them and in a way that gets our message across. So for us, that's about working with a collective of bloggers. And the important thing here is not just the scale they give, actually, it's tremendous. You know, you amalgamate all these people together, and for anything that they put out into the market, they're reaching just over 2 million consumers. So that's big scale. But the fundamental importance here is influence. Scale and influence is a really powerful thing, and that's what bloggers deliver for you. And that's why it's so important for us. So, from our consumer point of view, looking at the touch points, this is what the EU campaign represents. So 2 main pillars, if you like. So October and June represent the print and advertising work. But running through the year is what we do on PR and is what we do on social media. The message here is not too dissimilar to what the message was for little Jane or little Paul aged 8 in school, which is, do you know what? Potatoes are healthy. It's just that we're slightly more sophisticated when we talk to the adult audience and we give them something a bit more tangible. So here we're talking about the naturally fat-free potassium and fibre aspect. And this really comes back to what Chris was saying at the beginning this morning, which is, you know what? Have this as part of your midweek meal repertoire. And that's what this campaign is about delivering from a promotions point of view. And I've got loads of time. So I should say thank you.
Okay. So, questions time. We have Sarah there with a mic. If anyone has any burning questions, it could be either about this new look, this guy in the corner who does have a name, by the way. Apparently it's called Bud. Any thoughts on the campaign? We have a question from this guy at the front. If you could just introduce yourself, that would be great.
Christopher Day, grower, Lincolnshire. I wanted to ask Nick about the follow-up of these 11 years you've been doing of school children. By my reckoning, some now will be 22. So have you monitored the impact on those 22-year-old consumers?
The programme that's been going for 10 years is Grow Your Own, so that's the primary school children. Some of those who were maybe 9 or 10 at the time may well now start to come into the market in terms of 18, 19-year-olds. The truth of the matter is it's very difficult to measure the impact that campaign is having in terms of Grow Your Own for a 9-year-old through to a 19 or 20-year-old making a purchase decision in a store. What we can say is that in terms of teachers constantly re-engaging with Grow Your Own, that there's a constant repeat rate there from teachers, and the feedback that we have from them is that it's engaging for the children and it's an activity they constantly want to run. I accept that's a very blunt measure in terms of the impact that an activity like Grow Your Own has. So what we're actively looking at the moment is how can we take somebody from a primary school and actually start to measure what they've taken out of Grow Your Own and carried forward into their secondary school experience. So we're looking at how can we track them when they're kind of 12, 13 or 14 years of age. To go much further than that is incredibly difficult, but that's the immediate measure that we're going to take.
Okay, thank you. Other thoughts, questions? Yes, the lady here near the front.
Thank you. My name is Raquel Izquierdo. I'm from Europatat, the European potato trade, representing the European traders. I had a question for Nick as well. In your campaign, are you considering to also touch the aspect of potatoes are not only good for you, but are also good in environmental terms, and like Sharon exposed the problem of food waste? And unfortunately, potatoes are one of the products that are very much attacked because consumers waste a lot of potatoes. I think it's also important to teach consumers about the fact that potatoes are not too environmentally harmful in terms of the energy that it takes to produce them, etc. So whether you are considering also to touch in that aspect. Thank you.
It comes down to making some hard choices about what you do. So those hard choices about who do you target from a consumer point of view, and the hard choices are about, okay, when you know who your target audience is, what are you trying to say to them? What's going to have the biggest impact? What's going to be the thing that makes the difference? Undoubtedly, there is a strong message around sustainability, but in terms of focus and being clear on the message and being really razor focused on that, it is about trying to drill home the health aspect. That's for us the biggest single thing that will make a difference, allied with a real understanding about the fact, you know what, I can have this from start to finish on a plate in 20 to 25 minutes. Does that mean sustainability is not important? It absolutely doesn't, but it comes down to making some hard choices in terms of consumer messaging and really drilling home those messages kind of consistently.
Sharon?
Just to add, I think Raquel's question is really important, and actually we, across both fresh and processing sector, we do share some of the same competing carbohydrates, and I think there are a lot of positive messages to talk about in terms of comparing potatoes to rice and pasta and the energy it takes to produce those other foodstuffs. So I think this is one key area where we could very much join up and have independent messages coming out of AHDB talking about the environmental sustainability of potatoes.
Thank you. Other thoughts, questions? Stunned silence. The guy at the back that's sleeping there? No? Then I have one perhaps for you there, Sharon, which is in terms of, you gave some great examples of innovations in crisps and chips, fried potatoes. In terms of the other snacks market, can you talk to us about what's happening there in terms of innovation?
Outside of potato, or?
No, still within the potato.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of examples, and obviously I had to select a few for a 15-minute talk. There's a lot of innovation going on around better-for-you products. So the air-popped crisps, for instance. That's probably a big area for us, particularly in light of what might be coming with the National Obesity Strategy, to have some of that as part of our portfolio.
Okay.
But I mean, for snack sector, again, I want to emphasise this point that the process sector also has competitors, and snack sector is one key area. So we've got quite a stronghold with crisps, but there are lots of other products coming onto the market that are competing with crisps. And that's why we need to get behind processed potato products as well. So meat snacks, high protein snacks, they're all competing with what was traditionally a probably potato-focused environment. So it is important that we promote processed potato products as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any last questions before we wrap up this session? No. Well, then, thank you for all coming and listening. And if we could just thank both our presenters here, Sharon Hall and Nick White. That's been very useful. Thank you.